I had never felt so small until that evening. The receptionist, a young blond man in a neat suit, furrowed his brows slightly as he looked at the computer screen. He looked up, polite, but clearly uneasy. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I don't see the name Rosalie on tonight's reservation list." I froze for a moment. "That's impossible. I was invited to a family dinner with my husband's side. They should already be here." He double-checked, then shook his head. "Yes, there's a reservation for 6 under Mrs. Veronica Stein, but your name isn't included." Before I could ask anything else, a familiar voice, cold as a December wind, echoed from behind me. "Oh, Rosalie, you really thought you were invited to this dinner?" I turned around. Veronica, my mother-in-law, stood there, dressed in a high-end silk gown, a Cartier watch on her wrist, her platinum hair styled into an elegant updo. She wasn't alone. Behind her was my husband, Nathan, eyes avoiding mine, and his 2 sisters, Lily and Harper, covering their mouths as they giggled like high school girls watching a cafeteria drama. I straightened my back, taking a deep breath. "I thought this was a family dinner. I'm Nathan's wife. Or did you forget that?" Veronica's lips curled into a thin smile, her gaze sharp as glass. "Family, yes, but not someone who only entered my house 2 years ago and still hasn't figured out how to dress for a place like this." Both the receptionist and I froze. The air around us turned still. Nearby guests started to glance our way. I heard whispers. My face burned, but I refused to lower my head. Lily giggled into her white wine glass. Harper glanced at me from head to toe, pure disdain in her eyes. Nathan remained silent. My husband, the one who once promised he'd always stand by me, just gripped the arm of his chair. Like silence would make everything disappear. I bit my lip to steady myself. "I didn't come here to argue, Veronica. Nathan invited me, and I believe this place has room for one more seat." "Oh, Rosalie," she laughed, syrupy sweet but vinegar sharp in tone. "This is Avenel, not some roadside diner you're used to. You do know that, right? Someone like you fits better with fast food than foie gras and French wine." Soft laughter rippled from the table nearby. I felt every glance slicing through my dignity, and in that moment, I realized this wasn't a mistake. This was a plan. She had deliberately left my name off the list, carefully arranged a lavish dinner just to stage a public humiliation, and Nathan let it happen. I said nothing. I met her eyes. No flinching, no fear. A different kind of wave was rising inside me. Not shame, but resolve. I didn't respond to Veronica's insult. I just gave her a slow, calm smile, one that made her flinch for a split second. Then I turned to the receptionist, my tone composed. "Would you kindly ask Mr. Miles Hammond, the owner, to come out?" The young man hesitated, clearly unsure. Veronica immediately burst into laughter. "This is hilarious. You think the owner's going to leave his kitchen just to talk to you? Rosalie, do you even know where you are right now?" I stayed silent, just looked at the receptionist with quiet confidence. I knew exactly what was about to happen, and I was ready. Not 2 minutes later, a tall man with salt and pepper hair stepped out from the back hallway. His white shirt was rolled neatly to the elbows, and a warm smile played at the corners of his lips. He walked with the ease of someone who knew every tile under his feet. Miles Hammond, probably in his early 50s, was one of the most respected restaurant owners in Chicago, and the main reason the Avenel was always booked months in advance. As soon as his eyes landed on me, his face lit up. "Rosalie? My goodness, is that really you, Rosalie Spencer?" I nodded, giving a slight tilt of the head. "Hi, Uncle Miles, long time no see." Veronica's eyes widened. Lily and Harper stopped laughing. Nathan stared down at the table like he wanted to disappear. Miles walked quickly over and gave me a warm, familiar hug. "I didn't recognize you at first. Didn't expect to see you here. You look incredible, as always." I smiled. "Thank you." I came to have dinner with family, but it seems they accidentally forgot to add my name. Miles glanced at Veronica, his expression sharpening ever so subtly. Sounds like there's been a misunderstanding. But don't worry, that'll be taken care of right away. Veronica forced a tight smile. I think you must be mistaken, sir. Rosalie is my daughter-in-law, and I don't recall her ever mentioning you. Miles turned to her, his voice low and composed. Mrs. Stein, right? A pleasure, but Rosalie isn't just someone's daughter-in-law. She was one of my top students when I taught at Northwood Culinary Institute, and also the person I trusted most during the years I ran a fine dining restaurant in New York. A loud "what?" escaped from Harper. Lily nearly spilled her wine. I looked straight at Veronica. You never asked me about my past, Veronica, because you always assumed there was nothing worth asking. Veronica pressed her lips together, trying to remain composed. But I could see she was spiraling. Miles signaled to the receptionist. Set up table 5 for Rosalie, and let the kitchen know. I'll be preparing her main course myself. I nodded politely in thanks. As I turned, I calmly walked over to the table where Veronica and the rest of my in-laws sat, still frozen in disbelief. Oh, look at that! What a coincidence! Table 5 is right next to the family table. Looks like I'll still get to enjoy a cozy little dinner after all. Veronica turned her face away, but she couldn't quite hide the fury building behind her eyes. Nathan finally looked up, his expression somewhere between awkward and ashamed. I gently pulled out the chair and sat down, as composed as if I were hosting this evening myself. Just a few minutes later, Miles personally brought out the appetizer, a plate of seared scallops in beurre blanc sauce, so exquisitely plated that heads began turning from the nearby tables. For Rosalie, he said, placing the dish in front of me with unmistakable respect. This one's not even on the menu yet. You're the first to try it. I smiled. Thank you, Uncle. After all these years, you still remember my palate. That's impressive. I scooped a small bite and placed it in my mouth. The flavor was smooth, rich, and incredibly refined. I closed my eyes for a second, savoring it. Then I looked directly at Veronica. How odd. A former waitress being personally served by the owner. Life's full of surprises. Veronica didn't respond. She just sat there, speechless, like her own arrogance had swallowed her whole. She was no longer the picture of elegance. Her fingers clutched her wine glass so tightly it looked like she might shatter it. Lily leaned over to whisper something to Harper, but clearly neither had the stomach for more smug remarks tonight. I cut another piece of scallop, brought it slowly to my lips. Not rushed, not flashy, but with a calm grace that felt like a silent slap to Veronica's ego. Nathan said nothing. He looked as if he were sitting on hot coals, eyes darting between his mother and me. After several long minutes of tense silence, Veronica finally spoke. How interesting to learn you used to work in service. That must explain how well you've performed tonight. I set my fork and knife down, dabbed my mouth with a linen napkin, and turned to face her squarely. Oh, I'm not performing, Veronica. I'm being myself. And maybe that's exactly what makes you uncomfortable. Her brows arched slightly, a sneer curling at the edge of her mouth. I'm just surprised. A former server, acting like she owns the place. I smiled. Actually, I managed a 5-star restaurant in New York, not just served. And Miles? He taught me everything, from front-of-house service to how to run a Michelin-standard kitchen. Harper dropped her fork onto her plate. Lily's eyes widened. But I wasn't done. It's strange how people assume working in hospitality means you're beneath them, I said, gently swirling my wine under the soft candlelight. But they never realize it's people like me who know patience, respect, and how to truly manage people. Veronica tried to cut in with a scoff. Well, I suppose that background gave you just enough polish to blend into places like this. I tilted my head, smiling gently, though my eyes were firm. My past didn't help me blend in. I made myself belong. You see me sitting here not because of luck or Nathan. I got here with my own two hands. And to me, that's far more valuable than any diamond ring or Hermes bag you're wearing. This time, the entire table fell completely silent. No more whispers, no more mocking glances. Only embarrassment in Veronica's eyes, and a flicker of confusion on Nathan's face. Miles returned, gently placing a glass of champagne beside me, smiling with quiet satisfaction. I've never once regretted teaching you. People like Rosalie aren't just skilled, they have real strength. For the first time that evening, Veronica didn't respond. She stared at me, as if searching for the timid girl she used to belittle. But that girl was long gone. I had changed. And she knew it. I raised my glass, my gaze never leaving her. You know, Veronica, you don't have to like me, but you're going to have to accept that I'm no longer the one standing behind. I toasted myself gently, then took a sip of champagne. The taste was crisp, bold, and unmistakably clear. Just like how I felt in that moment. A woman who knows exactly where she belongs, and no one could push her out again. I thought the night had reached its peak of drama, but no, Veronica never did know when to stop. After sitting through my words in silence, she took a small sip of wine and set her glass down with a delicate clink. Her expression was tight, as if the bitterness of pride wounded had just reached her tongue. "Impressive, Rosalie," she said, her voice as sweet as sugar but cold as ice. "But in the end, you're still someone who lives off her husband's money. Say whatever you want, the truth remains. Nathan is the one supporting you." I froze for a moment, my dessert spoon suspended mid-air. The table held its breath. Lily turned her face away. Harper swallowed hard. Nathan, still silent, just as he had been for the past 2 years, every time his mother stepped over the line and insulted me. I slowly and deliberately set my spoon down. "Veronica," I began, my voice calm, steady, like I was leading a financial seminar. "You really believe I live off Nathan's money?" "Isn't that the case?" she replied with a faint chuckle. "Your freelance work, that little shop of yours? Who pays for rent in River North? Who put up the initial investment?" "Don't tell me it was you." I tilted my head slightly, locking eyes with her. "I won't tell you, I'll show you." I reached into my clutch and pulled out a slim cream envelope, placing it gently on the table. "I prepared this 2 weeks ago, just in case we had a night like this." I opened the envelope and slid out a notarized document. My name was printed in bold at the top, next to the name of the investment company Nathan always bragged about owning. I slid the copy toward her. "This is the original investment contract between me and Nathan, signed in 2017, 3 months before he launched his first company. The initial capital investment was $650,000 from my savings account. I requested 51% ownership, and that's never changed." No one said a word. Veronica stared at the document, as if the words themselves were burning into her vision. Nathan's face turned pale. "Rosalie?" he whispered, his voice catching in his throat. I didn't let him continue. "I worked in the restaurant industry for 10 years before I ever met him," I said, still looking at Veronica. "I saved every dollar on my own. No loans, no handouts. When Nathan had an idea but no money to fund it, I was the first person who believed in him." Harper whispered, "Oh my God," and Lily couldn't find a word to say. "And that little shop in River North?" I smiled softly. "I bought the space in my name. Nathan never paid a cent for it. Every month, I pay 5 employees, file my taxes, and turn a solid profit. I don't need anyone to support me, Veronica. The truth is..." I paused, turning to look at Nathan. "He's the one who needs me." No one objected. No one dared. Because deep down, they all knew I was telling the truth. I folded my arms and leaned back in my chair. "I've stayed quiet for the past 2 years because I thought silence meant keeping the peace, but tonight, I stood outside this restaurant, treated like a parasite, like I didn't belong. I took a long breath and said each word clearly, deliberately. And I realized I don't need to prove my worth anymore. I know who I am. And I know exactly who's been depending on whom. Nathan lowered his head. He didn't argue, didn't defend his mother, didn't protect me. Just like every other time, I stood up, calmly. I think I finished my meal. Thank you, Miles. Miles gave a slight nod. Always an honor to serve you, Rosalie. I stepped away from the table. Before leaving, I turned back to look at Veronica, the woman who had spent years trying to make me feel small, to crush my sense of worth. You used to think I was someone easy to control. But from now on, you'll have to learn to live in a world where I'm no longer silent. And then I turned and walked away, leaving behind a table frozen in silence, a mother-in-law red with rage, and a husband who finally realized he had just lost the most valuable thing in his life. I stepped out of the Avenel into the golden glow spilling from South Dearborn Street. The chill of the November wind brushed against my thin coat, but I didn't feel a thing. I wasn't shaking. I had no regrets. And for the first time in years, I felt clear. When the restaurant doors closed behind me, I knew a chapter had ended. I pulled my phone from my coat pocket, my fingers scrolling through contacts until I stopped at Amanda, attorney, a lawyer who had helped me with financial consultations years ago, now a trusted ally. Me. Hi, Amanda, I'm ready. Let's begin the divorce process. Draft the first version as soon as you can. The message sent. I stood still for a few seconds, looking up at the glowing windows high above. Offices, still buzzing. Lives, still moving. I thought about how many times I had lied to myself, believing Nathan would change. That love could somehow fill in the void left by cowardice. But tonight, when I watched him sit in silence while his mother humiliated me, I understood he never chose me. And he never would. I got home before Nathan. His car wasn't in the garage yet. The house was quiet, still, like it always was at night. But tonight, it wasn't a home anymore. Just an empty shell. I walked into the office. The one Nathan always kept locked when he had sensitive documents. But I knew the code. 0827. My birthday. Ironic, really. The safe clicked open with a familiar sound. I opened it, my eyes scanning the neatly filed stacks of paperwork. Company formation documents, original investment agreements, bank authorizations. All right there in black and white, my name printed boldly as the primary contributor. I pulled out my phone and photographed every page, not because I doubted the legal side, Amanda would handle that, but because I needed to preserve the truth. I needed to remember that I had always been the one backing the empire Nathan claimed was self-made. Putting everything back in place, I walked upstairs to the bedroom, opened the closet, pulled out my suitcase. No panic, no rush. I folded my clothes, packed my favorite books, and slipped in the small pieces of jewelry I loved, as if I were carefully packing away the past. As I wheeled my suitcase into the living room, I heard the front door open. Nathan walked in, his coat still on, and froze when he saw me standing there, suitcase by my side, the overhead light reflecting off a face that no longer looked angry, just calm and resolved. "Rosalie," he said softly, "where are you going?" I didn't answer right away. I just looked at him, the man I had loved, trusted, hoped for, and replied gently, "I'm leaving." He took a few steps forward, panic flashing in his eyes. "About tonight. I'm sorry. My mom. She shouldn't have done that, but you know how she is, you know?" I cut him off, my voice low but firm. I know how she is. And I know how you are too. I've known for a long time, but I kept trying to ignore it. Nathan stiffened. I continued. Tonight wasn't the first time she did that. The wedding, Christmas, every holiday. She's humiliated me in front of others. But what really hurt wasn't her. It was that you never said a word. I just wanted to keep the peace, he mumbled. I let out a dry laugh, not amused. Keeping the peace by letting your wife be shamed in public? By letting your mother define who I am for our entire marriage? He fell silent. I looked him straight in the eye. I've been waiting for you to choose me for years, but you always chose silence, always chose her by never choosing me. I bent down and pulled up the suitcase handle. This time, I'm choosing myself. And then I walked past him, gently, without resentment, leaving behind the man who once promised to protect me, but never did. I didn't know what lay ahead, but I knew one thing. I was walking away from the life someone else had written for me and starting a new chapter, one authored by me. Nathan stood frozen in the living room, watching me pull my suitcase toward the door. "Rosalie, you can't do this," he said, his voice almost pleading. "You can't just walk away from everything." I turned back, looking him straight in the eye, not with anger, but with the cold clarity I had forged through years of quiet hurt. "Everything what, Nathan?" I asked softly. "Love? Respect? Or a marriage where I was the only one trying to hold on?" He stepped closer, his face changing color. "If you think you can just leave and take half of my assets..." I laughed, a short, dry, pitying laugh. "You think this is about money?" I opened my handbag, pulled out a file envelope, and tossed it lightly onto the table. "Those are copies of the original investment contract, real estate ownership papers, and our agreement when we started the company." Nathan stared blankly at the envelope. His hands trembled as he opened it, eyes scanning each page. Every word, every figure bore my name, Rosalie Spencer. As the majority shareholder, holding 51% ownership, and as the listed owner of the Gold Coast penthouse, he always called a reward for success. "No way," he muttered, going pale. "I thought you signed over the ownership last year." I raised an eyebrow. "You thought. But as usual, you didn't read the terms closely. Remember when I said I'd let the attorney handle the paperwork? I did re-sign the agreement, but not the way you assumed. I only agreed to change the structure. The power still stayed with me." Nathan's lips tightened. "You tricked me." I shook my head calmly. "I protected myself. You underestimated me. You let your mother tear me down, left me alone in this marriage. I invested my time, my money, my trust. And all I got in return was silence and arrogance." He clenched his fists, narrowing his eyes. "You're not getting away with this, Rosalie. I'll sue." I stepped closer, my voice dropping. "Go ahead. But before you waste more on legal fees, you should know that every expense, every contract, every major asset bears my signature. And now I have copies of everything. I don't need to take anything from you, because," I leaned in with a soft smile, "you never actually owned anything to begin with." Nathan didn't answer. He looked at me like I was a stranger. Maybe, for the first time, he realized the woman standing before him wasn't the faint shadow behind him anymore. I pulled my suitcase, hand on the doorknob. "I'll be staying at the penthouse," I said firmly. "From now on, that space is mine, not ours." "Rosalie," his voice cracked. This can't end like this." I looked over my shoulder and said softly, "It's not an ending, Nathan. It's the beginning. The beginning of a life where I don't need anyone's permission to be respected." I opened the door and stepped out. The door clicked shut behind me, a final punctuation mark to a chapter I had tried to protect for far too long. On the way to the penthouse, I didn't cry. I didn't need to. My tears had already been spent. In all those moments Nathan stayed silent, in all the nights Veronica humiliated me, in all the times I had to console myself. That night, I stood in the living room on the 34th floor, looking out over the glittering lights of Chicago below. I turned on the warm lighting, played a soft jazz tune, and poured myself a glass of red wine from my private cabinet, the kind I bought with the first money I earned after leaving the service industry. I wasn't celebrating victory. I was celebrating freedom. 1 month later, I sat in the penthouse living room, holding a steaming cappuccino, gazing through the wide floor-to-ceilinged windows. Winter mornings in Chicago were still cold, but this time I didn't feel lonely. A new message lit up my phone. It was Amanda, my attorney. Amanda, all paperwork is finalized. The court has granted you full rights to the assets and company shares. Divorce is officially recognized as of today. Congratulations, Rosalie. I set my glass down, lips curving into a faint smile, not a victorious smile, but the kind you wear when you've just stepped out of a locked room after years inside, finally breathing in the air of true freedom. I was no longer Nathan Stein's wife, and I was no longer the daughter-in-law of Veronica, the woman who, for years, saw me as a thorn in her side, a blemish on the prestigious name she tried so hard to preserve. The last time I spoke to Nathan was over a Zoom call arranged by our lawyers. He never looked me in the eye. He just focused on the clauses, the assets split, the things that never really belonged to him. As for Veronica, she had called me 6 times over the past 2 weeks, some angry, some sugar-coated. I didn't answer a single one. The last text she sent read, "If you dare destroy this family, don't blame me for being cruel." I read it, then replied with a single line. A family can't be destroyed if it was never truly built. Then I blocked her number. For good. That afternoon, I met Amanda at a riverside cafe. She slid a folder with a red seal across the table to me. "Congratulations," Amanda said, raising her espresso. "Not even 36, and you own a business, real estate, and now your freedom." I smiled, eyes drifting to the gently rippling water. Honestly, I feel like I'm only just starting to live. Everything before this felt like I was borrowing someone else's life. Amanda tilted her head. "Do you regret any of it?" I shook my head. No. I spent years trying to please a family that never wanted to accept me. And I don't regret trying. I only wish I had chosen myself sooner. That night, I returned to the penthouse, the place once hailed as Nathan's trophy of success, now my own sanctuary. I turned on some jazz, opened the windows, letting the November chill mix with the soft scent of beeswax candles. I settled into the armchair by the fireplace, laptop open to a document titled Rosalie Ventures, Phase 1 Artisan and Community Arts Store Chain. I used to think I was born to stand in the background, but now I know I was born to lead, in my own way, on my own terms. A new message popped up. It was from Nathan. "Nathan, I know you won't reply, but I don't know what to do anymore. Could you at least tell me why it all had to end like this?" I stared at the message. There was no sting this time, only a quiet amusement. I typed a few lines, then paused. After a moment, I deleted them all and replied with just 3 words. "No longer obligated." Then I blocked him, one final time. I didn't need anyone to understand why I left. I didn't need apologies. I didn't need anyone to validate my worth, because I had already proven it to myself. And as I turned off my phone and poured another glass of red wine, I whispered something to myself. Something that, had I heard it years ago, would have made me cry. For the first time in my life, I chose myself. And that's the strongest thing I've ever done. Rosalie's story is a powerful reminder that self-respect and personal worth don't come from what others give us. They come from the choices we make for ourselves. In real life, many people, especially women, stay in unfair relationships out of fear of loss. But like Rosalie, when we find the courage to stand up and let go of what harms us, we're not losing anything. We're finally reclaiming who we truly are. Freedom begins the moment you dare to choose yourself. What do you think about Rosalie's decision? Would you do the same in her situation? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt stories about family and life.